Bobby. Thanks. That's what he's talking about. Woo! Hey, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, baby breakers.
Woo! Listen, Boogie Woogie Man feel good.
He's going for that figure four. He's got the figure four.
Randy Macho Man Savage now steps into the ring.
Kill me! Kill me!
Oh, yeah!
Here we go. You look at me the whole time.
Okay.
So just kind of tell me how the Rock and Roll Express kind of got put together. Just for something that people don't know, just in case.
Me and my brother were together first.
Yeah.
And then me and Ricky got together in 1982. And longest tag team in history now, 30 years.
And talk about how you guys went. I guess you guys were Bill Watts, and then how did you guys wind up with Jim Crockett?
Well, we were in Memphis, Tennessee first, then we went to Bill Watts, Mid-South, and then we wrestled down there and we broke all their records they ever had. At the time, they wouldn't, we taping now?
Yeah.
Okay, at the time, we didn't, Bill Watts never used small guys. And back then, me and Ricky was probably the smallest guys that were around. For years, Mid-South only had guys 250 pounds and up. But me and Ricky went down there and we broke all their records they ever had. So while we were down there, about 2 years, breaking records, Ric Flair was a world champion. And he went back to Jim Crockett and said, man, y'all missing the boat. So there's two guys down there at the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, said they're tearing places up. People were camping out, buying tickets the night before just to get tickets. They camped out in the parking lots, which was unheard of back then. And so they wrestled in the Superdome one time, and then Jim Crockett came down. He said, guys, the only reason I'm down here is to see y'all wrestle. He said, Ric Flair said that y'all were the hottest thing around. And he said, I want to come down here and see what y'all can do. So he went out and watched the wrestling matches, and about 30 minutes later he came back and said, man, he said, y'all guys are phenomenal. He says, I'd like to have y'all come to Charlotte if y'all would. We would give you a chance for the World Tag Team titles. So us, eager, we jumped on the chance. So we came to Charlotte, and Jim Crockett said, I'm gonna tell you right now, he said, the territory's down, the crowds ain't that good. He says, we'll see what happens. So we went down there and they played our tapes 2 weeks before we got there. And when we got there in July of 85, and I'd never seen a bad house. Everywhere we went was selling out. And we broke records after records here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Did you know when you were leaving to come here that it was going to get so huge?
I didn't think it was going to get that big. Well, I guess I could say that everywhere we went, it was just rock and roll. Rock and roll was just something that was going on. We were like rock stars.
And why do you think that was so? Why were you guys so huge? I mean, everywhere.
Everywhere we went, me and Ricky, we molded together, and it seemed like we knew what each other was going to do at every time. And like we went to Charlotte, North Carolina, and wrestled there, and like I said, broke records. And we went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and the place had $48,000 house. And they called us in the office the next day, and they said, guys, y'all broke a 50-year record. We never had that big of a crowd in Raleigh, North Carolina. So the biggest crowd they ever had before was Ric Flair against Black Jack Mulligan. He said that record there is like Babe Ruth. It'd never be broken. $48,000. Well, 2 weeks later, we go back to Raleigh, and we do 56,000. And that was just unheard of.
Just talk about, I know the money's a lot bigger today, but talk about back then. I mean, that was huge money. I mean, you guys were making big time money working for Jim Crockett.
Yeah, no comparison with the guys are making now. The guys now are making like huge money. But I think wrestling back then was a lot more competitive, and you saw a lot more wrestling than you see today.
Yeah. You talked about they played your tape for 2 weeks. I guess that was kind of the Dusty Rhodes idea, building you guys up and then coming in and beating the Russians for the tag titles. Kind of talk about that. I mean, it was a TV match and it went for like 45 minutes.
Well, actually, it went 52 minutes.
Kind of just tell me a little bit about it.
We came to Charlotte and went to, the town our first night was in Shelby, North Carolina, and it was like middle of July. It was like 99 degrees, and it was in the school gym, and people's never seen us before, and we've never ever wrestled the Russians. Never, heard of them, but never wrestled them, and that was Barry Darsow and Ivan Koloff. So we get in the ring and I mean, I'm sweating before we even started wrestling. And about 52 minutes, we ended up winning the world titles. And I remember going back to the dressing room, taking my shoes off, and actually poured water out of my boots. That's how hot it was.
How much weight do you think you lost that night?
Phew, I couldn't tell you, probably 5 pounds.
Well, when you got to the building that night, and obviously it was probably sold out, everybody there to see you guys. You kind of know you guys were going to set the place on fire like you did?
Well, it was like you said earlier, the videos. We went to Mid-South before we went there. They showed our videos 2 weeks before we went there. And I remember pulling up and get out of the car and it's Channel 5 News. And they said, "Who are y'all?" And I said, "Well, that's Ricky Morton and I'm Robert Gibson with the Rock and Roll Express." They said, "I know that, but look at these people." So they've been camping out for 2 days to buy tickets, which is unheard of. I said, "Well, let's just keep rocking,
I always heard the story about how John Cougar Mellencamp came to Charlotte and couldn't sell out the building, but you guys sold it out for like 3 weeks straight.
Yeah, it was sold out Charlotte Coliseum. That was, I remember going to Charlotte Coliseum. Every time we pulled up to the Coliseum, back then they didn't have security out front. But after about a week we were there, they had to have security because I just bought a brand new Trans Am, 1988, brand new Trans Am. And me and Ricky pulled up to the building and the people swarmed my car. They were probably 15 thick. I mean, they was on top of my car and I'm blowing my horn like, "Get off of my car." And it was wow, it was wild.
And you're never going to see that kind of stuff again in wrestling?
No, I don't think so.
What was it like? I mean, what was that like? I mean, it must have been pretty intense. I guess you guys probably couldn't go out in public.
Well, we couldn't go out in public. I would stop at red lights, and people would actually, at a red light, they would actually put their car in gear and jump out and come knocking on my window. And I'm saying, like, "Get back in your car. The light's green, Let's keep going."
You talked about the Russians, Ivan Koloff and Barry Darsow. What were they like? I mean, what was Ivan Koloff like as a wrestler?
He was tremendous. He was a machine. You couldn't hurt the guy, and you couldn't slow him down. He was just like a machine. He just always 100 miles an hour.
And I mean, they were the Russians. I mean, they were hated. I mean, talk about that gimmick.
Not only that were they hated, they were tough, and when you went out to the wrestling, you knew you was in for a fight.
Okay. What do you think of Dusty Rhodes as a booker? I mean, now looking back, I guess about 20 years, people say he was great, he was a genius, and then they say he sucked because they say he ran the company out of money. How do you feel about Dusty Rhodes as a booker?
I think the company went down. After me and Ricky left the territory. We left the territory, and I remember reading the Charlotte news. I was still living in Charlotte, and I remember reading the Charlotte newspaper, and they were saying, "Where did the Rock and Roll Express go?" And Jim Crockett's response was, "They haven't left. We're negotiating a contract." In the meantime, he knew we were gone, and after we left, the territory just went.
Well, why did you guys leave?
It was a conflict between the office and us.
Well, getting back to Dusty Rhodes, I guess you probably liked him because he built you guys up and got you guys pretty off to a good start with him.
Well, I wouldn't say it was all Dusty Rhodes because we were hot before Dusty even had a chance to put his fingers on us. But we came in and it was like Dusty Rhodes and them guys were up here, and all of a sudden Rock and Roll Express was up here, and I think it made a lot of people jealous.
But as a booker in general,
He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy. He put a lot of good things together.
You ever heard the term Dusty Finish?
No, I haven't.
You know what but do you know what it means?
No.
Where he would use the finish in his matches with Flair all the time. The referee would go down, he'd pin him, another ref would come down. People say that kind of hurt the territory. There wasn't clean finishes going on, and Dusty was trying to save face. What do you think of the term Dusty finish? You never heard of it?
I've never heard of the Dusty finish. Yeah.
So what do you think of it now that you know what it is?
I knew we were hot with the Russians, and there's three of the Russians. There was Nikita, Barry, and Ivan, and only me and Ricky. And so then Dusty, like I said, we went up here. So all of a sudden Dusty said, put himself in the ring with us. So we got in the ring, and Dusty would say, hey man, put one of them bandanas on me, So we'd tie a bandana on him, did a 6-man tag.
Yes, he was smart to get with the hot flame, huh?
Yeah, we were pretty hot, and I think he tried to pull us apart at one time, but tried to cool us off, but he couldn't. People were they wanted some rock and roll.
Why do you think they wanted you guys so bad?
I want to say Ricky's good looks, maybe. I don't know. I guess because we went there, we worked hard for the people, and we gave them their money's worth.
What did you think about Jim Crockett as a owner?
As a promoter?
Yeah. What do you think of him?
I think we made him a lot of money. There's no doubt we made Jim Crockett a lot of money, because when we first came here, he'd been in business 50 years, but within a year, he done bought a jet, he done bought a big airplane. I mean, we made him a lot of money.
What did you think about that buying two jets and all that stuff?
That's what I'm saying. He didn't have that in 50 years. All of a sudden, he bought all that, and he noticed after we left, all that disappeared.
You think it was a smart move to buy those jets? I mean, it probably cost a ton of money to keep them going.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money to keep them going, but then again, you got to realize you put excuse me, you put a lot of guys on the plane that saved him a lot of commercial airline tickets. So it probably balanced out.
All right, you guys were really hot everywhere you went, and then you came here and kind of got even hotter. And then he gets on TBS, Turner, and goes national with TV. Just kind of talk about how that even made you guys even bigger and how important that television was going all over the country.
Yeah, Channel 17, we wrestled there every Saturday morning. And you had to be there I think it started at 10 o'clock. So imagine getting up, like if you're in Philly the night before and you fly into Atlanta 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, then you got to get up and fight in 5 hours. It was pretty rough every Saturday morning. So then after you wrestle on TV on Saturday morning, you did fly to Baltimore, or you'd fly New York, Jacksonville, Florida. And back then we was like steady going.
Talk about how important that TV was to make you guys even bigger stars.
Channel 17 was hot, and it made us a big name. It really got Rock and Roll Express really nationwide.
Do you think Jim would have ever been able to go out to like Chicago and San Francisco if he wouldn't have been able to be on that TV, or would he just probably would have stayed around?
He probably would have just stayed around here.
So it was a pretty big deal to have that.
Yeah, I believe that TV really shot him up.
I've talked to a lot of other guys. They say that if Crockett would have stayed in the little loop here in the Southeast and would have not went to Philly and California, they'd still be in business today. Do you think that's true? Because I mean, it was hot. I mean, still talk about it today.
Yeah, Charlotte was a hot territory, and I believe he came back to Charlotte with his name, he could still get something going. There's room out there for another big company, and he tried to. See, Vince at the time was really going nationwide too, but Jim Crockett Promotion was a lot higher had a lot better wrestlers, a lot better talent, I think, in the South.
You think it was smart for him? I talked to Jackie Crockett last week, and he said they were trying to compete with Vince, and do you think that was a smart move, trying to go after him? I mean, he had all the connections with New York and all the big cities. Did you think it was a smart move to trying to go after him?
Yeah, I think it would have been a smart move. I just think that, here again, I want to go back to when they let us go, this territory kind of dropped down. And I don't know why Jim Crockett Promotion actually lied to the people and said that rock and roll is coming back. I remember reading an article in the Charlotte Observer. It says, ladies and gentlemen, the rock and roll is not coming back. So,
you remember what year that was?
I want to say 88, end of 88, maybe December of 88.
You guys also had a good run with the Four Horsemen. Talk about that.
Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, were a great team. And then Arn Anderson and Tully. And then Ole came in with his 4 horsemen. And fighting Ole Anderson, I mean, you had to actually knock the out of him. I mean, when he hit you, he knocked the piss out of you. So he was a more veteran than we were. And he couldn't understand how come these 2 little guys are selling out everywhere.
I don't know if this story's true, but I've heard of it. You guys were wrestling the Andersons, and I think Ricky was in the ring or something, and Ole hit him or something, and he went down or something, or you know what I'm talking about? Can you tell me?
Yeah, that was in. It actually took place in Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia. Gave Ricky a tag. He come in, bam, 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 and hit Ole about 15 times. And Ole's holding the ropes, wasn't going down. Finally, Ricky just stopped, went in the middle of the ring, and just fell flat on his back. And Ole said, "What are you doing?" Ricky said, "Hell, you wouldn't go down. I thought I would." So, and after that, when Ole saw that we were selling out everywhere we went, then we had super matches.
Well, tell me about the Horseman group. I mean, they were just kind of the ultimate bad guys, and then they put them against you guys, and it was just even bigger.
Yeah,
to me it was.
They were an elite team. They had good. What do I say? They worked good together, and we worked good together, and it just something that got together and just made like apple pie.
What do you think of Ric Flair? Back then?
I think of him now the same as I did then. He's a super nice guy.
What about as a professional wrestler?
One of the greatest.
And why is that?
Because he had a lot of ring psychology. He could go out there, and when he'd go out there and give you money's worth, and he was a super performer.
What's your thoughts on Magnum TA?
Magnum. I met him back when I first went to Mid-South, and we were pretty good friends. As the years went on, we had a little something that happened between us that I'd rather not talk about.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But he was kind of, when he came to Crockett, they were kind of building him to be the next big star, I guess. And then he had the accident and personal feelings aside. What happened? What did you think when he had that bad crash and was paralyzed?
I felt really bad for him and his family. It was a tragic accident, and he was like Dusty's right-hand guy. Whatever Dusty did, Magnum was right with him. So.
It's a sad situation.
Yeah, sad situation.
Crockett bought out the UWF, Bill Watts' territory. What did you think of that? I mean, Vince was kind of just going in and kicking everybody out.
Right.
And he went and spent all this money to buy something that was pretty much dying. What did you think of that?
There again, Mid-South, like I said, we were there in 82 to 85. And like I said, we broke records everywhere in the Mid-South. And then it seemed like when we left Mid-South went down. They just didn't have nobody to come in behind us.
Was it a dumb move to buy it and bring all those guys to Crockett?
I don't know if he made any money off that or not. But I remember when he bought AWA out, Dusty sent all the big guys to Baltimore. And we were wrestling in Charlotte, North Carolina. Baltimore did like $30,000. And Charlotte sold out at the Coliseum. We did like 102,000. And the next day, Dusty comes in and says, "Guys, there's 2 things you don't do in Charlotte, North Carolina." I said, "What's that, Dusty?" He says, "Y'all do not sell it out when I'm not on the card." So they sent the A-team to Baltimore, and like I said, they only did 30,000. And here's me and Ricky over here by ourselves. We do 102,000. And that was like, I guess they felt like that was a slap in their face. I don't know.
You guys couldn't control that. The people, that's the people.
That's the people, yeah. That's what a lot of jealousy, I guess. That's when they tried to pull us apart.
And how come you guys never, I mean, you disappeared for a little while in the late 80s. I guess you got hurt.
Yeah, I had knee surgery.
And I guess Ricky went on and did a little single stuff, but you were talking about you got hurt. And then why did they never break you guys apart?
Why did they never break us apart?
They didn't allow you guys? You didn't allow it? You guys didn't allow it?
Well, wasn't us, it was the fans. The fans didn't want to see Ricky by himself. They didn't want to see me by myself. So after my knee surgery, I came back in 1990, and Ricky called me up, and he says they wanted to turn him bad. I said, Ricky, what you want to go bad for? He said, well, contract Sabada. I said, Ricky, I said, don't go bad. I says, I'll be back next month. I said, we can be hotter than ever. And that's when he went to the York Foundation. So I think it was Dusty's way of trying to get us apart. And I was out of the picture, so while I was out of the picture, all that took place. But that didn't last long. As soon as I was gone, as soon as they split us up, then they fired Ricky. See, so now neither one of us had a job.
So did you guys ever think, you know, I want to go off on my own, or was it just so hot you didn't even think about it?
I never wanted to be on our own because we were such a good team together.
You guys are still going out there and doing it today.
Yeah, still doing it today. When we go to these little shows, we're still packing the houses out.
And just kind of talk about, why do you think people 25 years later still want to come out and see the Rock and Roll Express?
I guess well, I go to these arenas, and the people that come up to us now, and you get pictures and autographs, and they're telling their kids, now these are the guys that really brought wrestling to where it is today.
How long you guys plan on doing it? So you can't do it no more?
I love it. I've been around the wrestling business since I was 6 years old. I turned professional when I was 17, and this year is mine and Ricky's 30th year anniversary. Longest tag team in history.
When you hear Starrcade, what do you think?
Oh man, Starrcade was, it was something that was magnificent. You go there and these people were just, it was magnificent.
And every year it was always in Greensboro. Just talk about that town. I mean, they built that as the home of Crockett.
Then, you know, that was, and I think one thing that hurt Crockett was, like I said, every year Greensboro was a big show, but then when he tried to go all over the world, he would go to Chicago and do Starrcade and have the big screen in Greensboro, and that was like slapping the people's face in Greensboro. You go there and watch, and it would still be sold out, but they'd be watching it on the big screen. It wasn't traditional.
I guess kind of Greensboro was the house that the Crockett's and you guys built.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Crockett Promotions, tell me, well, I know what it is, but just kind of tell people, to you, what was Jim Crockett Promotions?
It was a super territory to work for. Every Wednesday we went down, we did our TV tapings on Wednesdays. And after that, we'd jump in a car and we had to haul butt to Raleigh. And they ran us like cattle. We wrestled 9 days a week, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. And all these other guys were getting days off, and we're like, hey, can we have a day off? And their response was, if we give y'all a day off, the company will lose $20,000 or $30,000 a night.
Wow. Talk about the money you guys were making back then. I mean, it was quite big money. I know from talking to Jackie Crockett, he was saying guys were making, well, I don't know if it's 150 grand a week, but then I've heard people say that's all they made in a year.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of money were you guys making back then?
Well, them guys were making that kind of money. They was doubling our pay. And that's what was sad, because we was putting asses in seats, and they were getting all the money. See, we was just on the low contracts. That was one of our disputes.
I know they contracts used to not be big, but then they kind of came around towards the end of the Crockett. You think that also hurt them guys getting these big contracts and kind of didn't start to take it easy?
I don't know how big the guys' contracts were, but me and Ricky didn't get none of that.
You guys did have a contract, right?
Yeah.
I know Jimmy Valiant said about 12 of you guys had them, and after they sold to Turner, you guys just kind of all left after that.
Well, when they sold to Turner, that's when the big contracts came out, the $1 million contracts. And there again, me and Rick was a day late. We didn't get none of that.
What did you think of them having to sell? To sell the company? Was it kind of sad? Because it was still doing really good business when they sold it, or when they lost all their money.
I remember Ricky Morton said one time on one of his shoot interviews, he said, Kevin Nash, he said, Ted Turner, he said, we're the reason Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett out. And he said, Kevin Nash, you're the reason he sold it out.
You don't like Kevin Nash too much.
At the time they did. I think they're all right now, I
I
think.
know they had a match or something, didn't they?
Yeah, they had a match up in Maryland.
Can't talk to you without saying Rock and Roll versus Midnight Express. Talk about that. I mean, y'all did that before you came here, but it seemed to be bigger here than
Yeah,
to us.
you're right.
Mid-South. Talk about that.
That was some feuds that the fans really got into it. And I remember one night in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the Midnight Express screwed us out of a match one night. The Midnight Express are going back to the locker room, and the people were so mad they were jumping out of the top of the balcony on top of them. I mean, actually jumping off the balcony on top of the guys. And every time we wrestled them, we had a riot.
Why was that so? Why were those 4 guys just like this?
Yeah, we clicked. We clicked, and then you had Jim Cornette, which everybody hated. Everybody hated Jim Cornette. He had that racket, and when he hit you with that racket, and believe me, that racket, when he hit you, it hurt. But we sold out. We made most of our money with the Midnight Express.
And I guess it would have been on fire without Cornette, but I mean, he just kind of added that extra dimension.
Yeah, he was like the mama's boy, and the people didn't like him. I remember Jim Cornette back in Louisville, Kentucky, back before me and Ricky were even partners. He was a guy in the back, used to have a camera. He would take pictures of the wrestlers. And then Jerry Jarrett told him one time, he says, the wrestlers hate you so bad, if you become a manager, see what would happen. So they gave him a chance of being a manager, and the rest is history.
I guess you preferred the original Midnight Express over the second version. You like Dennis and Bobby together, I guess. And Stan.
Yeah, Dennis and Bobby. See, before it was Dennis and Bobby, it was Dennis and Norvell Austin. And then it went Dennis and Bobby. And then when Dennis left, Stan Lane came in the picture. And he picked up great. Stan Lane was a super wrestler and a nice guy.
It didn't matter who was with Bobby Eaton, it was always going to be hot if it was Rock and Roll Midnight, right?
Yeah. And it seemed like back then everybody wanted to wrestle the Rock and Roll Express because everywhere we went, thank God, we were selling out.
Well, what do you think about that company going out of business?
Jim Crockett?
Yeah. What do you think about it?
I think they made some bad decisions. The biggest decision was letting the Rock and Roll Express go.
So it wasn't the airplanes, it wasn't the national TV, it was just...
I believe it was letting the Rock and Roll Express go. Sure do.
Okay. When you look back on that time in your life, say, how do you want to remember? How will you remember your time with Jim Crockett Promotions?
Great. I had my in '85 was when we came here. '87, I was blessed with a beautiful little girl that was born here in Charlotte, North Carolina. She's 24 years old now, and we had a nice little house up on the hill. And Jim Crockett Promotions. It's definitely one of the high spots of the Rock and Roll Express career.
Were you sad to see it go?
Yeah, I was. I'd love to see it come back.
You think it would? You think it would ever come back?
I don't think it would come back, but I believe it would take off if it did come back.
Why did you say that?
Because the people knew they had Jim Crockett put out a good sport, and they knew that they would get their money's worth. And like I said, all these territories I go to, are these little independent shows. Everybody says they wish wrestling was like it was in the 80s. They say if we want to watch a good wrestling match, we bring out tapes from the 80s.
How does that make you feel? I guess that means you're doing something right.
It means I'm doing something right. The other day, for a matter of fact, I went down to TNA. They were in Atlanta. I went down to just say hi to Al Snow, who's a good friend of mine. I went down to see him. And as I pull up, the fans are out there. And I pull up in my car, and all of a sudden, here come the fans. I ain't been on TV in 20 years, and all them fans come. They were screaming, "Rock and roll!" Here they come to my car, and I'm signing. I got out and went over to the gate, and I'm signing some autographs. In the meantime, while I'm doing this, I noticed, I ain't gonna mention no names, but I noticed some of the TNA stars pulling up, and they're getting out of their car, and and the fans are staying where I'm at. I'm thinking, wow, something's wrong with this picture. How come they still here and they ain't chasing the stars over here? And I'm thinking, well, TNA ought to be able to look outside and go, huh, we must be doing something wrong. The fans are over here and our guys are here. How come, something's wrong?
So you think if somebody had the money and the business smarts and got some of the old Crockett guys and some of the younger guys and put them all on TV, you think it'd take off, huh?
I really do. I really do.
What do you think of Ricky Morton as a partner? I guess you guys probably act like family. Probably yell at each other.
Yeah, we've been together, like I said, 30 years now, our 30-year anniversary. And me and Ricky, I was with him more than I was my wife. And when we did, you be with somebody so long, you know each other's nerves. And when that happened, we just went different ways in our cars, and then we hooked back up, go our different ways. And I love him to death. I love Ricky Morton.
I guess 30 years later, could you imagine doing it with anybody else?
The only other partner I had that taught me and taught Ricky Morton was my brother, Rick Gibson. Now, he's passed now. A drunk driver hit him, broke every bone in his body. And matter of fact, Rick Gibson was the first wrestler to ever drop kick off the top rope. He was the very first. He did that in 1972. And he taught me, and me and my brother were together before me and Ricky, so everything me and my brother did just turned over and me and Ricky Morton did it.
But I guess what I was asking was, do you think, looking back, would you have rather done it besides your brother with anybody else?
I don't think it would have worked with anybody else. Me and Ricky Morton had that chemistry. That double drop kick was hot.
And talk about that move. I mean, everybody still goes. When you guys pull it out today, people still go, "Oh man!"
Yeah, but
you guys still doing it?
We're still doing it, and there again, that comes from me and my brother Rick Gibson. Me and him was doing the double drop kick.
When I always try to ask this question: when you're dead and gone, fans 20, 30, 40 years later down the road look back and say, they look up the Rock and Roll Express. What do you hope they say, and what do you hope they remember?
I hope they say that it was two good hard workers. They went out there and they gave the people his money was worth. And my little boy now, he's 16. I want him to get in. I'd love for him to get in the wrestling. I'm not going to push him. He likes it, but he's into football. He's quarterbacking. Well, last year he threw 23 touchdowns, and he wants to be a football player, wants to be a quarterback for Florida State, and that's his goal right now. But eventually, I hope he would carry on the name.
Hopefully so, they will. I forgot to ask you, they put you guys on a tour bus back in the day, and I can't remember. It's hard to say.
That was the Rock and Roll Express Super Summer Sizzler. We had a big bus, like a Greyhound bus, and they painted it up Rock and Roll Express, and we didn't go to none of the major towns. We hit all the small towns, and that week they did over $500,000 worth of business.
It was only a week-long thing?
1 week. But they did over $500,000, excuse me. And there again, like Florence, South Carolina, it's not a big town at all, and they did $40-something thousand out in the football field, which was unheard of. And before that was 48 or 42,000 in Florence. And before that, the biggest house they ever had there was $8,000.
Was that one of the craziest weeks of your life?
Yeah, it was a crazy week.
And then again, just kind of tell me about that. You were going to small towns. I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And talk to people, I guess the people were just filling places up.
We'd go to the football stadiums, and they'd be hanging off the rafters. They were just, if you go to the arena, if you didn't get there early, you're using a 2 or 3 hour line trying to get in the building.
Do you remember you guys were wrestling that week?
Old and Orange.
The whole week?
Yeah, the whole week, every night.
What did they say when they were on that week with you guys?
I don't know what they would say. I really don't.
They were happy, right?
Yeah, I imagine they were. But it was an experience on the bus. Not only they had the reason it was the Rock and Roll Super Summer Sizzler, they had a look-alike contest. 2 little kids dressed up, and they got to spend the evening with me and Ricky. So we got to go to Carowinds. And I remember going to Carowinds First time I ever been to Carowinds, and we actually go in the park. And as we're walking through the park, all of a sudden you look behind you, and there's so many people. We get up on they put us on a roller coaster, and we ride in the roller coaster. Me and this little boy, and Ricky and this little boy, and we're on the roller coaster, and all of a sudden the roller coaster stops. Security runs out, and they says, "Guys, y'all have erupted the Carowinds." Said everybody in this park are at the exit gate or at the entrance gate. He says, "We hate it, but y'all have got to leave. Y'all are closing down the Carowinds Park."
That's insane, right?
That's insane.
How did you feel when you heard that? It's like, oh man, we ain't gonna be able to get out of here.
Well, when they stopped with it, like I said, security was there, and we're climbing over the rails, and they had to take us out through a back gate to exit the park because, like I said, everybody was at the entrance gate. The whole park was, oof. And I remember back then, my little boy was playing baseball, and we could I'd go to his game. You get football, baseball fields, 2 or 3 mounds, We'd pull up in the car, and the kids they'd be playing ball, and they'd see us, and they would just drop their bats and gloves, and just leave the ball game. And the coaches would come out there, "Kids, get back out here." That we couldn't go there either because we closed the park up. So it was unreal.
I guess it was kind of a hassle, but I guess you wouldn't have changed it because
Well, it was sometimes it was a hassle, especially you couldn't go out to eat nowhere. You couldn't go to the mall. Matter of fact, one time my wife wanted me to go to the mall so bad. It was during Christmas. I said, "Honey, I can't go to the mall." She said, "I'm gonna fix you up when nobody will know you." So she fixed me up and my hair up, and I didn't even recognize myself. So we get out of the car and we walk in the mall. As soon as I walk in the door in the mall, this guy and this woman come out. As I'm walking in, the guy goes, "Rock and Roll Express." I just turned around and got back in my car, and we went home.
Oh man, that's crazy. All right, you got any other good stories you want to tell about your time?
It was one heck of a ride. Even today, we go out and the fans are they're still behind the Rock and Roll Express. It was some kind of chemistry that we did to the fans that they say it was the greatest memories of their lives, and I'm glad to fulfill that.
Just kind of tell me how you guys got involved with Jim Crockett Promotions back in '85, I guess.
Yeah, 1980. I think it was July the 10th, 1985, or somewhere around that area. You got to understand, back then you worked territories, and Robert and I, we started out in Memphis, Tennessee, where Jerry Lawler put us together. Then we went to, and at that time we was playing second fiddle to a team called the Fabulous Ones, Stan Lane, Steve Kern. So we went to, Bill Watts come in and say, this took us to Louisiana. And you got to understand, in Louisiana was a territory by itself, in which I dearly enjoyed being there. I love working for Bill Watts, but see, and understanding in the term, I'm talking wrestling lingo, or how you want to put it, we popped the territory. In other words, we did great business. Matter of fact, we was working with the Midnight Express. Now this is before we went into the Crockett territory. And matter of fact, we were wrestling in the Superdome. And then we had about, I think we was wrestling the Road Warriors. And the Road Warriors were hot off TBS. At the time, it's when Ted Turner, I forgot, I think of his name, Jim Barnett. Jim Barnett owned the Atlanta thing. And Ric Flair, I got to say about him, he was the world heavyweight champion. Ric Flair had been coming in and out of Louisiana working. And at that time, Jim Crockett was taking over TBS. He bought it, and that was, and Ric Flair had been coming in and seeing Robert and I wrestle, but we was selling out everywhere we went. And the night we was at the Superdome, and I never forget this, we were wrestling Ted DiBiase, and no, it was The Road Warriors was the time before that, I'm sorry, because we did 40,000 people with the Road Warriors. But that night we was wrestling Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Ted DiBiase. See, it's hard. I'm going back to 1985 to remember this. And Muhammad Ali was there that night. And I never forget, my son that's 30 years old now, he was just a little kid, and he was sitting in the floor playing with the cars. And I noticed Muhammad Ali come in. Muhammad Ali got on the floor playing cars with him, and that for a long time. And I seen Ric Flair come in. And believe it or not, I never met Jimmy Crockett, and I never met, any of the promotions over there, promoters. So I noticed this little guy come in with Ric Flair, and he didn't say nothing. He just was standing on the other side of the room, and the matches started, and everybody cleared out, and I'm standing there, and he come over to me. He says, "I want to introduce myself. So I'm Jimmy Crockett. I heard a lot about you guys." He says, "I flew in from Charlotte with Ric Flair." He says, "I'm taking over TBS, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. We're going to go all across the nation, and we're looking for a good babyface tag team, something different." And at that time, we were different. And I said, "Well, cool." And I talked, see, I didn't know much, and I talked to Ted DiBiase and Dr. Death, Steve Williams. I said, "Man, this guy coming there, Jimmy Crockett." And he said, "He come down here to see us, watch us wrestle." And Ted DiBiase looked at me and said, "Well, we'll give him something to talk about." And you got to understand that time. This is what started pay-per-views. Guys don't even realize this. It was Bill Watts running the Superdome. He ran a big show there every 6 months. And, you put anywhere from 30 to 40,000 people in the Superdome for a wrestling match. In 1984 or 1985, that was hard to believe. So, believe it, we went out to the ring, and we tore the house down because, Bill Watts gave us a great push there. We was tag team champions, but I mean, unbelievable to hear 40,000 people hollering rock and roll, and we came back from the match, and Jimmy Crockett asked me, what do you make here a week? And but plus he filled me in. He said, "Dusty Rhodes is a booker, but I'm the owner." And Bum owned it. He says, "I really like to have you guys to come to work for me." And don't get me wrong, I wasn't trying to, because I loved Louisiana. I love working for Bill Watts, and it's not the point about it, but it was being on nationwide TV. And I got to say that we gave our notice, and we went in, and our first night in, we went into it was either July the 10th or the 12th. No, it was the 12th, because my son, Brad, was born on July the 10th. And I remember that was on a Sunday, and they did TV on Tuesday. And I flew in that day. Robert and I, that's when we was in Shelby, North Carolina. But we went back to Louisiana because we had to finish out being down there. But that night is when, and I got to say this for Dusty Rhodes, we went in, and he put all the, and we won. That night, we won the World Tag Team Championship belts. Our first night in, and everybody have watched us. To me, I watch a lot of wrestling, and when you watch yourself, it's one of the greatest matches I've ever, because at that time, their TV show, and plus he still had Mid-Atlantic going. And I understand me, Mid-Atlantic was a bicycle tape, okay? And by a lot of people out there that might not understand what a bicycle tape is. It's when, that is show that week, that Saturday, and then in another town it show the following Saturday, whatever where. and they kept it off, and he hadn't started TBS yet. TBS was coming up like a month later. And when Robert and I won the World Tag Team, plus, and I got to say this for Dusty Rhodes, he and Jimmy Crockett, they really built Ivan Koloff, Barry Dorso, which is, and Crusher, Crusher Khrushchev, Barry Dorso, and Nikolai Koloff. They had, at this time, the United States didn't have a great relationship with Russia. And they pushed, Ivan and Nikita, and this is the way you draw money in this business. A lot of people forgot that. They had beat everybody in the Mid-Atlantic area. Even Dusty Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, Dusty Rhodes, Manny Fernandez, everybody that was in that thing, and they brought Robert and I, and here we are, these young rock and rollers. We were rock stars, I guess, we didn't know it, and we come in on our first night, and the match, TV, our TV was an hour long. Our match went 58 minutes on the Mid-Atlantic TV area when it was there, showing there. And we beat the Russians for the world titles, and buddy, was it great. We was instantly over.
Talk about that TBS, that really pushed it over the top even more. They were already huge at the time, but the TBS was going everywhere and it pushed it.
Well, buddy, it went all over the United States. You see it, and like I say, like when we won the world titles, it didn't show into Charlotte to that Saturday. Okay, and then when it hit TBS, they had all the films, the things, they show, they run it. But dude, it was crazy because now you're on TBS, now you're nationwide. And instead of wrestling in the Mid-Atlantic territory, like North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, and over in Tennessee area, Eastern Tennessee, and up in West Virginia, and now you're all over the United States. And all of a sudden it just, and it wasn't just us. You got to understand, Jimmy Crockett's a smart man. He had a lot of great talent. Dusty Rhodes was one of the best bookers at that time, and he knew how to use his talent. And then when you went to the TBS, buddy, we went from working in Charlotte, in Richmond, and Norfolk, and Columbia, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, Bristol, Tennessee, to one night, you're in Philadelphia. The next night you're liable to be in Kansas City, Kansas. The next night Dallas. The next night Miami. We became nationwide, but I got to say this: they never forgot about the Mid-South area, because we were in Charlotte every month. We were in Richmond, Virginia every month, Norfolk, Hampton areas, and it did great. But
tell me about Jimmy Crockett Jr. Just what you thought of him as he wasn't the promoter, just as a businessman. A lot of people say he was kind of mesmerized with what Dusty was doing and kind of lost focus on what was.
Well, I don't like, because we sit here talking, and people has heard me before do shoot interviews that will really get on people, but that's all about making money. That's all that's about. But it's sitting here speaking of the truth. Jimmy Crockett, you got to understand, him and David, and you had Jackie Crockett too. That was their territory, but Jimmy was the head honcho. You had Frances, which is their sister. It all belonged to all of them. But I guess watching the territory grow, Jimmy Crockett, you can't blame nobody. They outgrew what they were doing. It would have been great. They bought private airplanes. They bought this and that, and Dusty. And I got to say, Dusty's the one that when we had to the Great American Bashes or the big shows, like they put it on. At the time, you didn't have pay-per-view. Like I remember on Thanksgiving night, I forgot what we called it, the Great American Bash. We would, no, that wasn't Great American. Huh? Starcade. Boy, have I lost it. Okay. But we built it up to have the one in Atlanta and one in Greensboro. And you had all these main events, and they had the closed circuit TV. Like when they have a match in Greensboro, then it would go to the big screen and closed circuit out of Atlanta. It was the coolest thing ever, and buddy, did it do good business. But see, Dusty, and it wasn't Jimmy, but Jimmy listened to Dusty. They outgrew what they were doing. You know what I'm saying? The next thing you know, I mean, you're spending all this. They're making money, but they're spending more than they're making. And that's what really, I'm not here to say bad things about nobody. Personally, I like Jimmy Crockett. Personally, I like Dusty Rhodes. We had our problems. Everybody does. It's just any business that you're in. But that's how come the territory lost focus on it, because they lost the focus of, instead of making money, they were spending more than they was making.
You think they just weren't paying attention to what was going on? Or?
Well, I heard that, they was wanting to do something, and I really heard that it was the accountant's fault. He didn't keep count, and then when it come right down to it, boy, they figured all this up. They was going to do this, but there was $11 million in the hole. Now, for an individual that owns it, it's not like Time Warner or a $1 billion business like Vince. When you're $11 million in the hole, it's hard to focus on a family business when it's like that. That's when they had to file Chapter 11. And that's when Time Warner came in and took, it bought Jimmy Crockett out. But it was, it was a whole bunch of different things. It was, Dusty was spending more than they was making.
Well, just tell me about the business you guys were doing. It was huge, turning crowds away.
Yes, you got to understand this, especially in the Mid-South area. We drew so much, we broke records, attendance records, but now, they got bigger buildings in all these towns. I remember in Fayetteville, North Carolina, our first night there, Robert and I broke Elvis Presley's record of attendance. I know our first time that we wrestled in Columbia, South Carolina. I don't know if you've ever been to the Memorial Coliseum down there. It's an old building, but I mean, it was so many people packed in Greensboro, buddy. And people don't understand this. And this is Doug Dillinger. He was a police officer in Charlotte, but he traveled with us. This is how he got his job, security job, which he went on to with WCW. It was because when Robert and I pulled up at Greensboro. And there were so many people out back that we got trapped in the car. And I'll never forget, Robert had a new Trans Am. And the people were rocking it. And honestly, it took them about 45 minutes to an hour just to get us out of the car to inside the building. In Greensboro, North Carolina, buddy, you talking about attendance records. My goodness. I mean, because I know we wrestled there. And another one is John and I went to the concert. We wrestled in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was sold. Robert and I sold it completely out against the Midnight Express. And I went to John Mellencamp, and he was there the next night, concert, because I lived in Charlotte. And it was the greatest thing I ever heard in my life, because he didn't know me, but I was sitting out in the crowd, and he goes, "Here I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, And we got 3/4 of a building, and who are these guys they call the Rock and Roll Express that sold it completely out last night. And he said it on the microphone, and I really flipped. That was great. But see, you got to understand now, when you're on that TBS, you don't come professional wrestlers no more. You come movie stars too. And that's what they create WWE as of now. You look at the wrestlers, they're not wrestlers, they're all movie stars.
I heard you say when you guys first came to Charlotte, you guys were on billboards. You guys were the professional athletes.
Well, you didn't have the football team. Jimmy Crockett owned a little semi-pro baseball team, but it was nothing like it is now. You didn't have no basketball team. When you come into Charlotte on 85, the big billboard sign, watch Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling every Saturday at so-and-so time, and it was Robert and I's picture on the billboard, So you got to understand I bought a house in Charlotte about a month after we came in from Louisiana. And I bought the house, and I woke up, I heard some noise, and honestly, it was like, I opened my front door, and I stepped outside, and there had to be 400 or 500 people in my front yard. Just everywhere, partying, having a great time, and I'm going, I had to get the police to come out there, and and what now I was telling them, guys, this is great, but this is my home. I done stole my flower pots, my welcome mats, and everything. It was wild. Couldn't go nowhere really. I remember I went to the mall one time and I put my hair up in the hat. I had sunglasses on at night, and I didn't get 10 feet in the door, and I got mobbed. But don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. I enjoyed that. It was great.
Talk about your feud with the Midnight Express. I mean, you guys would go, I know you guys had 3 crews, and you guys would go around and sell it out too, just on your own.
Well, understand, that's what in Louisiana we already done that. But you see, that was a territory there. People off, in the Charlotte area, TBS. And I got to say this right here, they brought us in, and understand, I'm going back before when we wrestled the Russians, Ivan, Nikita, and Barry. See, they got us over. You understand me? That was their job. After we beat them, and you got to understand this now. We're 2 all-American guys, young kids, that wrestle these big brute Russians that have beat everybody. That after we beat them for the world title, every town we went to, we went an hour time limit. You see, boom, and it's an hour time limit, boom. And then when they brought the Midnight Express in, and I got you got to understand, this is Jimmy Cornette, great talker, understanding, and then you got the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express, Express. And at the time it was Dennis and Bobby when it first came in. You see, it was a natural thing. It was a natural angle. Cornette, and you see, notice we wrestled, and the Russians getting us over, and we feuding with them all over. Then with the 4 Horsemen beating us up, and then then they brought the Midnight Express in. See, it was just a natural angle. Cornette knew how to get heat. We're saying like before, and it's like nowadays, old school or new school wrestling. You see, to me, it's neither one of them. It's just called the right way, how to get heat. And it still works today if they can do it. But it worked out. But when you talk about doing business, and plus they had so much heat on them, you had riots every night. And it carried on into the next thing because, we dropped the belts to them, then we won the belts back, and then we went into the thing with the 4 Horsemen. And
when people look back and they say those were some of the greatest tag team matches of all time, how does that make you feel? What do you think?
Well, it's a great compliment, and it gets to me. But understand, even when Dennis left, and they put Stan Lane in there, and Stan Lane, buddy, come around there and filled the shoes. And so looking back to those days, not only with the Midnight Express, but with all of them, I don't know if you ever watched, and this is a great compliment. They asked Stone Cold Steve Austin, which is Steve Williams. I don't know if you ever watched his video he's got out. And it's the same thing. They asked him, says, what's the greatest match that you ever seen or you ever watched? He said, oh, I can tell you that right off the bat. He said, that's the Rock and Roll Express versus Arn and Ole Anderson. He said, it's the greatest match ever. He said, matter of fact, I watch it all the time. That's a great compliment coming from people like that, you know. You got to understand, you know, you see, when you run a territory, you got to keep it going. And you got to keep feeding us heels. And when we broke into the Four Horsemen, not only did you have Ole and Arn, you had Flair and Arn, or Flair and Ole. You had, at the time, I think Lex Luger was one of the Four Horsemen. You know, you had...
Describe the Horsemen to me.
Beg your pardon?
Describe the Horsemen to me.
You talking about working wise, or because you know...
In general, just with both.
A buddy...
As wrestlers?
Well, Arn Anderson was one of the greatest talkers in this business. Flair, you know, and in my world, there's nobody better than Ric Flair. I don't care. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Ric Flair mark. I'm not, because I know Rick personally, and I know Rick in his business-wise. There's nobody that ever worked harder, nobody that ever talked harder, nobody that you see, and I'm not knocking Terry, Hulk Hogan, but I mean, you very well ever see a match where Hulk Hogan went over 10 minutes in a match. And as you see, you got to understand, Ric Flair was the real world heavyweight champion. When he traveled all over the country. Every night, dude, he'd go an hour. Because you can't go into it, that's, you know, before the territories ended. Because you can't go there and beat their top babyface. You go an hour time limit. And he did this every night. And then when we went to the Four Horsemen, I mean, you got to look, you got Ole Anderson, you know, one of the greatest professors of our business, to describe it my way. Tully Blanchard, great worker. Arn Anderson and Ric Flair, that was the Four Horsemen there. Lex come in later, I think, after Ole. But buddy, we did great business with them. You know, even, you know, like, we was on these little towns. Like, I don't know if you remember this. It's called the Rock and Roll Express Super Summer Sizzling Tour. Try to say that 3 times. But it was us, and the main event was Robert and I against Ole and Arn. You know, because Dusty and all them other guys, Flair and all them, they were, which was on TBS, they was all the big towns. And guys, we went to towns, I never went to Florence, South Carolina, where they usually draw. You know, we hadn't been there before, but I know before we come in there, they draw 200 or 300 people. But it was a football. They got a town football stadium, and it was completely sold out. We had, you know, and Dusty and Jimmy Crockett had us a bus made for that thing. They had the Rock and Roll Express on the side of it, and I never forget there in Florence when we pulled in it, and to see the stadium, to understand that you're in this town that usually draws 400 or 500 people, and you got 10 to 15,000 people when we pulled in, you know, and it was same like that in every town that we went in. See, it was business. And you know, the Four Horsemen, some of the greatest workers, well, not psychology is what got it done. They knew what to do.
A lot of people I've talked to for this thing so far said, you know, Magnum TA, he was going to be the next big babyface singles guy, and then he had his accident. Just kind of tell me about Magnum, and then just talk to me about the accident and how that affected you and affected the business.
Well, it didn't. Magnum was a great guy. Magnum was a good friend of mine, still is. You know, we used to go to Binnigan's in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where everybody, you know, like we was close by, go there and have a drink or something to eat. And Magnum had a, you know, he wrecked his car on the way home from there, raining, hit a telephone pole, broke his neck. But see, one thing you got to understand about this business, you're always replaceable. There's always somebody else that could step in. Now, unfortunate for Magnum, and you know, God works in mysterious ways. I can't answer what happened, but I can tell you what did happen. You know, he broke his neck. You know, he couldn't work no more. Couldn't wrestle. And if the accident didn't happen, yes, Magnum would have been. How would I put that? You know, he had been the Hulk Hogan of the Mid-South area. Not the Mid-South, you know, the Jimmy Crockett's territory, the TBS. But the accident did happen. But you see, it's just like the mail. The mail still got to run. The show's still got to go on. I'm not meaning this in a bad way, so please don't. Anybody that's watching this don't understand, because it's a horrible thing that happened. But it did happen. See, it's one thing you gotta always understand in this business, you're always replaceable. I can't go back to remember really who stepped in, but they built another babyface. Matter of fact, after a while after we got through going with the Four Horsemen, I did an angle with Flair. Yeah. As a matter of fact, buddy, we did record business together.
Yeah, you think he said you guys did like 11 straight Broadways?
We did 17. We did 17. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, twice on Sunday, because she ran 2 towns on Sunday. We did 17 straight in a row. But now I'm not going back to that. I mean, because we did great business. But I'm wanting everybody to understand that I'm not trying to sit here and say how it affected me or the business. I mean, it was tragic for Magnum TA. But you see, like in anything else, it's still got to go on. And that's what a lot of guys don't understand in this business. They get to a point that they think they're replaceable, or they're such a superstar, but they don't know. You can be replaced the next day. And
soon after that, people thought, you know, he was going to win the title, and, you know, you're replaceable. But a lot of people said, you know, Dusty kind of put himself back out there as the top guy. But how do you feel about the term when people say the Dusty finish? He gets a lot of crap for that.
The Dusty finish, what's the... you got to smarten me up to this.
You know, it would be him versus Flair, and he wouldn't want to lose clean with Flair, so they'd have Tommy Young go down, and then some shit would happen behind his back.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to say the Dusty finish, but sometimes it works that way. See, in order to be a heel, you got to have heat. And see, that's what's wrong with it. And to me, it's my opinion only. See, our business is not dead. Our business, they're so used to having writers instead of having a booker. To understand, for you to work with a heel, this heel's got to have heat. Now, when Ric Flair beat me, I mean, Ric Flair didn't put me in a figure 4 and make me give up. Do you understand? He always cheated. See, that's what makes a heel. And I'm not trying to go off on these things that a lot of people say. See, a lot of people think they know this business, but they don't know it. You know, it's what kills me. It's like Eric Bischoff, like being ahead of Impact Wrestling. And I say this, Broadway's is Eric Bischoff been. How many matches has he ever had? You see, and I'm not saying, and don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about what everybody says the Dusty finish. Well, see, what everybody else is saying is what they don't know about our business. I mean, you're Dusty Rhodes. I mean, you can't be, I mean, he's the top babyface. I mean, you can't, I mean, why would Flair want to make him give up for a figure 4? You got to cheat to beat him, to have heat. He has to have heat on him because they might be back in that next town 2 weeks, and people, see, that's what the people pay to see. The people pay to see the babyface beat the heel, but the heel keeps on screwing him. That's how you draw money in this business, and if they would do that today, it would change a lot of things.
You worked for Watts, UWF.
Yeah.
Eventually Crockett bought them out. Do you think that was a bad move? Did you know that they were kind of going out?
It wasn't. It wasn't a bad move for Bill Watts, because you see, it was already. I mean, but he had the courtesy of buying it out. You know, really, he could have just took it. You know, you got TV going in there. I mean, he didn't have to have Bill Watts' permission to come into Louisiana to wrestle. You understand me? So, I mean, it was good for Bill Watts. See, that's talking about when we got back there. They spent money that they didn't need to spend. And that's how come the territory went bankrupt.
There are 3 more topics to talk about, and I'll let you go. What did you think about when they said they were going to move out to Dallas and get in the movie business? How did you feel about that?
They was going to move out to Dallas and get in the movie business.
Yeah, they moved when they bought Watts. Crockett and Dusty moved out to Dallas and set up a shop out there.
Well, you know what, but and I'm not trying to, but I didn't know nothing about that.
Okay.
You know, if that was a secret that might have came out earlier for Dusty.
Well, now that's kind of, people have been talking about, what do you think about that? Do you think wrestlers getting into the movie business was a smart move back then?
Well, no, I don't think it was, because we were wrestlers. So we wasn't. See, like nowadays, like WWE, buddy, you're in their eyes. You know, that's the #1 rated show on TV, and these guys become, like I told you earlier, now they are movie stars. They're not just wrestlers. Business has changed over the years, and now, see, that was the worst thing they ever done, was to leave Charlotte. You know, Charlotte could still be a territory. Jimmy Crockett could still have Charlotte, North Carolina, and still be doing good business if, you know, some of the mistakes he made that he listened to Dusty about. You know, like Greensboro. You know, what really killed Greensboro is Starrcade. When WCW took it over, they moved Starrcade to another town. You know, that killed the town of Greensboro. And they don't even realize that. You know, Jimmy Crockett moving to Dallas. You know, Charlotte was, I mean, that was his roots, that was his base. You know, it could have went on, and it still could have went on.
So you think they'd still be in the business today if they would just stay in that loop, that bicycle undertakes?
Yes, I do, and I'm going to tell you why, because I have a lot of people that tell me, they ask me, Ricky Morton, how come I look at these things and you're on some of these independent shows, and do you outdraw Ring of Honor, you outdraw Impact Wrestling. You know, and don't get me wrong, but we don't draw 5,000 or 6,000 people. But the independent circuit, and us being high, this is how I make a living. I make my money in the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. See, the people here are still hungry for wrestling, and it's still. And if we could do it on the independent circuit and draw some of the people that we draw, just think if we still had TV every Saturday morning, you know, and it come on and see what's going on, and the advertisement of us knowing to be in these towns. You know, this is the hottest bed. I mean, it's just, this is me. I'm 57 years old, buddy, and I still make a good living from the Carolinas and Virginia area.
How would you describe Jim Crockett Promotions territory? It probably was the hottest one you ever worked for. Just kind of describe it for me.
Well, yeah. But buddy, see, we did the same thing in Louisiana. But Louisiana wasn't TBS. We did it great. To understand when you were on that nationwide TV, oh yeah, we was the hottest thing you ever seen. I mean, buddy, we sold out everywhere. And not just, and that's what I try to explain to these people today. I mean, how often does WWE come to Charlotte? What, once a year? They don't sell it out. Okay, look at us, buddy. We was there every 2 weeks, and we sold it out every 2 weeks. Can you imagine how hard we were? And see, that's when we first started out in Memphis, and I got to say that with Jerry Lawler. Dude, that territory, you sold out the towns every week. You ran Memphis every week, Louisville, but it was sold out. And when you're there once a year with all this they got on going on TV, and you can't sell it out once a year. Don't get me wrong, they make millions because they make their money off their advertisement, commercials, their sponsors, and they do, you know, he's a $1 billion business. I mean, a lot smarter than I am, but see, understand it's still there. They just don't, they're in a different place.
When fans look back at Jim Crockett Promotions, how should they look at it? How should it be remembered?
It's history. It's history of professional wrestling. It's what started everything. You had some of the greatest workers ever, some of the greatest matches. You know, if you go back and look at some of the matches and compare them to other people's, you know, it was no comparison. To go back, you know, Jimmy Crockett Promotion was to me, it's what started everything. Vince just had the money. You know, Vince was a step ahead of him, especially with their advertisement, the ratings on TV. And it was a wonderful time, buddy. As me being a part of it, it was great to know when you come into town, and especially when you come into smaller towns and the traffic's backed up 2 miles just to go into wrestling. It's an experience I can't tell you, you know, and it's still, as me, you know, I know I'm getting at the end of my road, buddy. You know, I know I'm getting old, but I still, and the reason I still work is I still work hard. I still hang with the best of them. That's the reason I'm still around. But you know, it's going to come a time I have to quit it, and I hate it because I love this business so much. It's the greatest business in the world. And if a guy's just understood, and they don't, you know, I'm not trying to say that, but Robert and I did a lot for this business. We paved a lot of roads for a lot of people, and that's Vince McMahon calling. And yeah, I get it a minute. Excuse me, guys. I just wish he had quit calling. No, but thank you for. I mean, that's all I can say. Let me answer this phone. Okay.